What if your anxiety isn't actually anxiety? And what if your panic attacks aren't a disorder, but your nervous system trying to protect you? And what if everything you've been told about managing anxiety is missing the root cause entirely? Today, we're breaking down the truth about trauma, the nervous system, and why so many people stay stuck in cycles of fear, overwhelm, and emotional dysregulation, even when they're doing everything right. Welcome back to Let's Talk Wellness Now, the show where we uncover the root causes of chronic illness, explore cutting-edge regenerative medicine, and empower you with the tools to heal. I'm Dr. Deb, your medical detective, and today we're diving into the root causes of anxiety, panic, and emotional dysregulation through a trauma-informed lens. If you or someone you love struggles with anxiety, panic attacks, burnout, or feeling like your nervous system is constantly on edge, this episode is for you. So grab your cup of coffee, tea, or whatever helps you unwind, settle in, and let's get started on your journey to deeper healing.
Tired of being told your labs are normal, but you still feel terrible? At Serenity Healthcare Center, we don't chase symptoms. We find the root cause. Hormones, gut health, autoimmune conditions, chronic fatigue, brain fog. We use cutting-edge functional and regenerative medicine to get you real answers and a real path forward. This isn't your average doctor's office. This is medicine the way it was meant to be practiced. You deserve to feel like yourself again. Visit serenityhealthcarecenter.com to book your appointment today.
Today, I'm joined by Dr. Nicole Cain, a naturopathic physician, clinical psychotherapist, EMDR trained practitioner, and the author of Panic Proof. What I love about your work is that you don't just look at mental health as a diagnosis, but you actually look at the full body, that root cause issue, and you blend psychology, biology, and holistic medicine. I love that. And I love how you've bridged the authority and relatability together. So before we put all those tools and solutions together, I want to start here because this is where people really lean in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why and how you got started in this. And then let's just explore away.
I love the gift of being able to share my story. I think humans, we started as storytellers. That's how information has been spread from human to human forever. And so for those who are listening, thank you for hearing my story. And I love hearing your stories. And mine began with a fanny pack in third grade, where I had my little, I want to help people kind of little bag that I carried around. And inside of it, there were Band-Aids and gauze and all the things a little girl would want to carry to help people. Very concrete way of expressing this personal sense of responsibility for helping other people, which was trained in me. I had this natural ability, this natural vigilance, but then that was very much reinforced and trained in me. And that desire coupled with the particular patterns that I was raised with very young parents who didn't really know what the heck. Yeah. Exactly. That if there was a manual, that should be the thing, the manual for that. My poor parents. And so there's a lot of stress and a lot of stuff. The way that I adapted, I use the metaphor of a winter coat. That coat that kept me warm in the winter of literal Iowa and metaphorical human adaptation was to be very much, I want to fix other people's problems and I want to regulate my parents. And to do that, I have to be hypervigilant. I have to be very emotionally attuned, which as I got older, that winter coat was super helpful and protective. But then in adulthood, I'm in literal and metaphorical Arizona. And that coat that helped me survive and helped me thrive is now suffocating me. And hypervigilance, hyperattunement turned into being a worrywart, being overly, I've been described in my past as perhaps neurotic and having symptoms of anxiety, which was the fertile ground for the body, the mind, the nervous system trying to protect and keep me in that hypervigilant state. And it resulted in a terrible panic meltdown, if you will, in 2015, where I stopped sleeping. I lost so much weight from anxiety and gut anxiety. I I stopped having my period. And it was very devastating and very debilitating. And at that time, I was a physician and helping people with anxiety. But the strategies and tools that I learned throughout my career to stop anxiety symptoms weren't working anymore. My anxiety didn't care about my suppressive strategies. And it resulted in me starting back at ground zero and really asking the fundamental questions of what is anxiety and what is anxiety not? And what is my anxiety trying to tell me? And once I became literate in the voice of anxiety as the body's attempts at creating a solution to a problem and then aligning with that voice, that's when my anxiety got better and my life transformed. And I wrote the book to share the world what I learned, and here we are.
Do you think we are misunderstanding anxiety in its entirety? Is it actually more of a protective mechanism than a disorder?
Yeah. A lot of my philosophy is rooted in adaptive information processing, which comes out of EMDR. And what that philosophy believes is that our symptoms are adaptations to what did or did not happen to us that get stuck and either become maladaptive or they're no longer useful. And so much of the work that I do and what we're really seeing substantiated by the research in neuroscience and psychoneuroimmunology and gut science, we're finding that this is the case, that the body is trying to adapt. We experience symptoms communicating those adaptations, and the suppressive model isn't good enough. We can actually do better than that. And the research is showing us how.
So how do people, I'm thinking primarily like high functioning people that look fine on the outside, but they're completely dysregulated internally. How do we transition their energy that they have in this togetherness to understanding what made them get there in the first place, and how do we turn them around so they don't feel like they're falling apart on the inside?
You're describing one of, I think, the biggest myths about stress and anxiety, which is that we don't have stress and anxiety. Because if I had anxiety, then I would be having panic attacks, right? Or I wouldn't be functioning. When we look at the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which helps us diagnose clinical disorders, they say it needs to interfere with your day-to-day living. But our symptoms start as whispers oftentimes before they turn into shouts. And so anxiety is on a spectrum. It's a spectrum experience. And that means that it can start really mild, and perhaps it doesn't start with feeling fearful or feeling anxious. Perhaps it starts with a little bit of racing of your thoughts, or perhaps it starts a little speeding up of your heart rate. Some people, they don't feel anxious, but their stomach is turning.
That nervous stomach that we call it, right?
Yes, the nervous stomach. And I see this often in kiddos where they may not have the language of what's going on, but they know that they feel like they want to throw up before school. And so by becoming more familiar with the voice of our symptoms, even high achievers who may not identify or who are very adept at coping through their symptoms can actually enjoy incredible transformations where perhaps in one example, you are able to reach half of your goals, but by leveraging your symptoms to make you even healthier, Hahnemann talks about in a way that obliges wonderment by those who are looking on, in a way where we can become so healthy and so centered and grounded in our wellness that we can live to our highest human potential. And I think that's what our symptoms enable us to do.
Yeah. And anxiety can show up in a lot of different ways, right? Like I think everybody's had an anxious episode, right? Where we're nervous energy or whatever we're calling it, right? But you could just be busy and have a lot of tasks that are trying to get done. And all of a sudden you kind of have this little panic or this little blow up because everything's just gotten to be too much on you. And you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get this done? I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the people to help me. And this is all going to fall apart. And that worry that takes us over. Is that what we're talking about as an anxiety episode as well? Or is that just more stress and our brains just kind of gone overloaded on us?
This question that you're asking, I think, is one of the most important questions. that we're asking in 2026 when we're recording this episode is that we have an entire human race that is so overstimulated beyond what we have evolved to withstand in such a small amount of time. I precede the internet. I feel really dated saying that, but I was born before the internet.
You and me both.
You were too. Yes.
Yes.
And our parents preceded the internet. And if we just go back a few generations, the amount of information was so much significantly smaller. And we have these filters in our brain. And so for those listeners who know neuroscience, you'll be right on board and vibing with this, but I'll try to make it a little bit easier for those who are like, neuroscience, now I'm going to dissociate and then I'll come back, right? But we have filters in our brain. And one of these important filters is called the salience network. And this part of the brain scans all the data in your environment. It scans all of this interoceptive data coming from the body, and it has to decide, is this relevant or can we tune it out? And that's why we could go through our days and there's billions and billions of data points coming into the salience network, but we can only focus on approximately 50 at a time. Only 50, because a lot of it has to filter out, right? So when something is relevant, it drops it down, sends a signal forward. But what we're seeing right now, and going back to the question that you asked about too many things to do, add to that all of the stimuli, whether it's sound or touch or news or push notifications or emails or whatever it is, it overwhelms the salience network. And when in doubt, send it on. So the salience network gets it. There's too much. I don't want to miss something. We're going to send it on. It sends that signal to the amygdala, the emotional processing part of the brain. And the amygdala is like, this is too much for us to handle. When in doubt, send it on. So the amygdala activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is that fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, fracture, stress axis. So you may be sitting at your computer answering emails, scheduling Calendly appointments, doing all of the things, and suddenly your heart is pounding, your stomach is churning, you're sweating, and you're irritated, and you don't know why. And it could be the nervous system input is overwhelming it. And here's a hack. While we're talking about that, may I share a tip for that moment? Okay, so if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh my gosh, I totally resonate with that. What is something I can do right away? One thing we see when we are holding still and we're facing forward and we're on a computer or on our phone is that we're in an orthopedic position that can mirror the freeze posture. Imagine a deer in headlights, right? They're frozen, right? So when we get that interoceptive data of I'm frozen in this forward-facing posture, even if mentally I'm not in a freeze, but rather that's just how I'm hanging out at my desk, the body will send that to your salience network, and the salience network may say, oh, dang, we're in danger. We're in a freeze, and create stress. So a quick hack for that is that every 20 minutes or so while you're working at your desk is to rotate your head and move your eyes. And so I would just instruct people to look over their left shoulder. Perhaps as you look over, you do a nice exhale and you rotate your eyes and your head, and then you breathe, and then you come back forward. You rotate to the opposite side on the exhale. You take a nice breath and you come back forward, and then you look past your computer screen at something farther along the wall or out the window. Focus on that for a moment and then come back. And it takes 5 seconds. And it can reset and interrupt those pathways to help combat some of that stimulus that's coming in.
It is really hard these days because as you were talking about that, and I'm thinking what I was doing today, right? I saw clients this morning. My emails are coming in. I'm getting text messages constantly. I'm trying to concentrate. I'm trying to get my notes done. And then I'm like, oh, I've got to remember to do this. Write that down. Oh, I've got to remember to do that. Write this down. And before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, like my brain is so overloaded with things and they just keep popping in. And it's so distracting for us that I was sitting here going, okay, I'm getting a little panicked. And then I'm afraid to look at what my heart rate is on my ring, because I'm like, oh my God, that's going to be high now because I can just kind of feel that whole sensation coming, and you try to take the deep breath and you try to disconnect. But I love that hack that you gave us to try, because as you were doing that, I was thinking to myself, you're right on with that, because it just takes you out of the moment for a second to just kind of, okay, turn everything else off, take you out of that for just that split few seconds. And then you can come back and go, okay, I got this. Because even if you just take the deep breath, you're like, your brain is still stimulating. You're taking the deep breath, but your brain is still. But when you have to focus on doing that movement and focus with your eyes, it forces your brain to think about what you're doing with this instead of forcing your brain at what you're looking for. I love that.
It's so quick. It's so easy. You can be super subtle about it. I have lots of high achievers who are sitting down and they're in a really important meeting and they just, they just stretch just move around a little bit.
Yeah, nobody knows what you're doing.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you have a sore neck, so do I. Who doesn't?
Yeah, too much computer time.
I got you. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
It does bring up that importance, though, of doing an audit of those moments, because the body is talking to us and what we deny will amplify and what we resist will persist. And so when we have an opportunity later, perhaps not in real time, but when we have an opportunity later, is really doing an audit of our yeses and our nos. And are there opportunities for me to decrease the deluge that's coming into my system? How can I create more boundaries in that external stimulatory input?
Yeah. One of the things one of my nurse practitioners told me, because we were in a meeting and I'm like, oh my God, my phone will not stop ringing. And all it is garbage calls, right? It's spam. Yeah. But it's distracting me all day long. She's like, well, you can just put that on Do Not Disturb. And I'm like, yeah, but then my important calls won't come in. She's like, no. Again, predates the computer time, right? And she's like, you can do this, set this so that only your important stuff comes in and all the spam stuff just never comes through. And I was like, seriously, it's that easy? And I did that and I saw my stress level and my anxiety level go down so much because I wasn't constantly getting pinged. Because even though I knew I didn't need to deal with it, it's still like it's ringing and I know it's spam, but then I'm irritated, like it's spam and why do they keep calling me? But as soon as I did that little hack, it was just like, poof, I don't have to feel like everybody's trying to get a hold of me, because the calls that come in then are just so minimal that it takes that distraction away. And I love talking about these little hacks because it happens to all of us, right? Yeah. And some of us just respond differently than others.
And what's brilliant about what you're describing is that you're reducing an obstacle to healing as opposed to just trying to manage symptoms, which is important. We can definitely explore that also. But when I had my 2015 meltdown, it wasn't necessarily because I wasn't doing the right things. I had an obstacle to healing. It's kind of like I always tell the story when I teach medical students is, Fred comes in and his toe hurts. We treat the toe pain. We could give him acetaminophen, Tylenol, whatever. We could do turmeric or white willow bark or acupuncture. But let's say that he keeps coming in and every single week his toe hurts again. So then we can start asking better questions. Well, the toe keeps hurting? What is it trying to tell us? We can ask, I think, what is more interesting? Well, what's going on? What happens before you hurt your toe? Oh, well, I'm dropping my bowling ball on it at league every week. So now we know it's not really about your toe. It's you're dropping the bowling ball. And so now we can start to explore, well, why is he dropping the bowling ball? What is the obstacle to cure? And I think that opens up a lot more interesting conversations clinically.
Yeah, it sure does. That's awesome. So let's transition a little bit deeper into this. Let's talk about trauma, because the word gets thrown around a lot lately. It's a super popular word. Everybody has trauma, right? We all do to some degree. Some are just little and some are big. But how do you define trauma in a way that people might not expect?
A trauma is defined as something that changes the way you see yourself, others, or the world. And trauma is not about the event or the thing or the person, but rather our system's ability to manage that. And that's why some people can go through the same event and have totally different outcomes. Two kids can be raised in the same household and have completely different adulthood experiences reflecting on that. And so the language I see, we're taking a shift in the language, because really originally when we were talking about trauma, the research, Bessel van der Kolk, Francine Shapiro, they were talking more about combat veterans, the Vietnam War veterans. And people will say, oh, I don't have trauma. I didn't go to war. What I think is more inclusive language and maybe a little bit more informed language is an adaptive event. Something did or did not happen, and we had to adapt to that. It could be a good adaptation. It could be a negative adaptation. It could become a maladaptation. But I think that's what we're seeing is the 2026 definition. The language is an adaptive event.
Yeah. Which makes sense because we all have so many of them. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I have many clients and family myself that, we went through the same experiences, but how one perceives it versus how the other perceives it, are completely different. And then how you've allowed it to affect your life as you go through is very different too for the same type of people. Even identical twins can experience the same thing and have a completely different outcome of what that event happened or how they felt about that event.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then it gets into the really cool nuances of epigenetics or gut microbiome or what's going on with histamine. And we could start to look at, environmental toxicities. What kinds of exposures do you have? And I talk about in Panic Proof the stress diathesis model, which is the metaphor of a glass of water. And the water that's being poured in is the representation of our stressors. And the amount that we can hold in the cup of water with the stressors are impacted by the amount of ice cubes or diatheses or risk factors that we have. So if I have one small ice cube, but my little brother has 10 big ice cubes, I'm going to be able to handle a lot more stress. So then we could start to really do some cool work where we can hold on to more stress and deal with more and have more bandwidth by targeting the ice cubes. So some people are like, well, Dr. Nicole, why are you talking about my gut microbiome when I have panic attacks when doing public speaking? Well, the dots are connected by our understanding of what the symptoms are saying.
Oh, that's so interesting. So if you're actually then looking at anxiety from a completely different aspect. And functional medicine has always done that, integrative, whatever we're calling it these days. We look at epigenetics, like you were talking about. So genes that can mutate, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, our listeners understand that better. They can be changed from environment, trauma. We have to learn to adapt with all of these chronic things, starvation and war. Our bodies have adapted over the lifetime to change some of those things. But when we're talking about microbiome, there's a lot of research that shows different strains of good bacteria, probiotics, for instance, can make a difference on how we feel emotionally, depression, anxiety, not to mention just gut health, right? Constipation, diarrhea, those kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit more to how we're utilizing some of these things in integrative medicine to help people with anxiety and depression?
This is one of my favorite topics. I just did a keynote at the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health conference talking about this. And this introduces the conversation about psychobiotics. And psychobiotics are probiotic bacteria. They're part of our microbiome that have the jobs of modifying mood regulating neurotransmitters and signaling agents and chemicals. And what we used to do, by and large, is to just give you a bunch of probiotics and hope for the best. Just eat some fiber and take I used to tell my patients, take at least 40 billion of the most varied probiotic that you can. And what we're finding in psychobiotic research, my favorite book on this is The Psychobiotic Revolution by Anderson, Cyan, and Dinan. And they look at not only what bacteria can be useful to change cortisol levels, can change estrogen metabolism, that can change serotonin production, and modifying all these specific agents, but then how do they work together? It's kind of like you have two very friendly kitty cats, but if you bring them into the same house, is there going to be kitty cat heaven, happiness, or is it going to be mayhem, right? They may be fine individually, but is there synergy? And not all probiotics work together synergistically. So we're finding that formulas need to be made and studied in clinical trials in humans, and they're doing that. The other thing that I think is really exciting that is quite a lot newer is that we have found that there is a gut oral brain axis. So the mouth is a very important ringleader in the health of the microbiome in our gut. And the microbes in your mouth will actually seed the microbes in the brain. And they've identified specific microbes in the brains of people who had Alzheimer's that originated in the mouth. And so suddenly our dentists need to be communicating with our emotional well-being practitioners. Your oral health will impact your gut health, which will impact your brain health, which will impact your mood. And I think that is exciting because we've talked about the gut-brain axis ad nauseum.
Yes.
But now we need to talk about the black box that is the brain microbiome.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because for so many years, we've all been taught that nothing goes past the brain barrier, right? No bacteria, none of that can do that. And here we are learning about bugs in the brain of people who have passed. Yeah. Thank goodness they've been nice enough to share this information with us because we would never have known. And I learned about this a few years back too, about 4 or 5 years ago, about the oral microbiome and talking about why we're treating the gut all the time, but the gut's not getting any better. And we're doing this in people with neurological conditions and they're not getting any better. And voila, we have this oral microbiome that nobody's addressing and it's not responding the same way that Borrelia, for instance, Lyme disease responds systemically, and we can kill it this way. But we cannot get rid of it in the oral DNA or the oral microbiome the same way. And we have to start looking at these different aspects of things. And certainly, I'm sure you too, when we start talking about this with clients, they kind of look at you like, huh? But it makes perfect sense that if we're only treating one part of the body, and we're hoping that it's a systemic effect, it would work. But we're finding so much of the things that we've always done are no longer working because they're not systemic effects anymore. Or maybe they were never that way in the first place and we just always thought they were.
And let's talk about orthodontics.
Yes.
One of my experiences is I was missing teeth. I congenitally did not have adult teeth in my incisors. And what can happen developmentally as the head and the skull are growing is if you don't have teeth holding that space open, then the other teeth can move in and forward. And then if you have braces that are pulling everything in and forward, then we have compression in the airway. And so we have all of these individuals who can't nose breathe. And they end up mouth breathing. And then the salivary amylase in the mouth that's supposed to keep the good bugs happy and get the bad bugs out. We swallow that. We seed our gut microbiome. Now the salivary amylase is drying up and we have a higher risk of halitosis and gingivitis and periodontitis. And so there's this whole movement for mouth taping is see if we can just close your mouth while you're sleeping and help you retrain mouth breathing. But I think an obstacle to cure for many of us is that we don't even have the nasal airway. And that's why we mouth breathe to begin with. So for those who are listening, who've been really feeling like they're stuck, is ask your doctor to do an exam of your airway. Look at your sleep apnea, see if you can breathe through your nose. That might be a little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. There's so much new information coming out. It's so fantastic. And I'm sure it's going to get quicker and quicker and quicker for us to learn now that we have AI to search through thousands of research documents for us in a minute or less, right? Probably not quite that quick if we're looking at thousands of papers. But it's really going to start to change the way we look at medicine and the way we do things. Do you think for a lot of people, when we're talking about this oral microbiome, does it affect the nervous system itself, like that dysregulation? Along with all the other microbes that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you were saying earlier, everything is affecting everything else. It's like I have a bowl of water and I put food coloring in it. It's not going to just stay in the area where we drop the food coloring. It's going to change the color of the entire system. So that domino effect, I think that sometimes the entry point isn't the obvious symptom. So we want to see if we can go deeper and deeper and deeper and ask, well, what was that an adaptation to? okay, well, what was that an adaptation to? And see if we can identify some of those. And we do this in trauma work and EMDR work. And I think we should do this more in medicine is, well, what was the original diathesis? What was the original adaptive mechanism? Because that could be a root cause. So somebody, let's say they have ancestral trauma. Let's say they're trying to lose weight and their family went through the Dutch famine.
Yeah.
And so they have an epigenetic change where they're really struggling to lose the weight, even though they've done all of the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then instead of all of the other branches of the trees, the leaves and the branches, is if we can try to figure out how to attenuate that genetic expression in that patient, then the rest of the pieces that they've put into place will work. So I think so. I think it's all talking to each other.
Yeah, I agree. Has there been specific bacterias or viruses that you have identified that affect the nervous system differently? Like, for instance, we know strep can create pans pandis and create anxiety. Have you found other bacterias and things like that that are linked to different psychological conditions that nobody's thinking about?
Microbial diversity is the name of the game. And so it's all about balance. And even like H. pylori, let's talk about. For a while there, we were running H. pylori tests. We're doing the scope and we were doing stool testing. And they're like, oh, you have H. pylori. We want to kill it.
Yeah.
And then we discovered that H. pylori can actually protect people from certain types of esophageal carcinomas.
And yet we're telling them it could give that to them.
Right. And so what I think is a more honest answer is that in the right amounts, each bacterium has its role. And so at some point, perhaps Clostridia difficile could have been useful. One of its jobs is it can interfere with dopamine hydroxylase and impact dopamine levels. But at some point, evolutionarily, that may have been beneficial. It could also cause us to reabsorb estrogen, which at some point could have been beneficial. But then if Clostridia becomes too high, then it can cause all sorts of symptoms that can be annoying to lethal. And so the answer to that question is, do we have microbial balance? And if some bacterium or virus starts to become opportunistic because of the environment, then yeah, that can be problematic. Just like if somebody is like, well, there's never too much water. Well, yeah, you can drown in water.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Some of those basic things we forget, right?
Yeah.
Are there some biological drivers for anxiety that are more prevalent than others that conventional medicine is missing?
Right now, what I'm seeing as a biological driver is we are in a crisis of immune system dysregulation.
Absolutely.
Immune system, I call this immune system anxiety, which is one of the phenotypes or subtypes of anxiety. And we have so many people that are experiencing long haul COVID symptoms. In fact, I have a client who is on my caseload and he was experiencing adult onset, really severe, really sudden obsessive compulsive disorder symptoms. And he had to quit his job. He had to move home he's an adult. He had to move home with his parents. And he went to the doctors. They did the blood work and they couldn't figure out what the heck happened. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. You just developed OCD. And I ended up running a metabolomics test. And on that test, there were issues with arginine metabolism in the urea cycle. And so I did a huge meta-analysis. I actually used Perplexity for this. I was like, pull up all of the research articles explaining arginine metabolism and how it might relate to the brain, and ended up discovering that there was a oxidative accumulative burden. So the body is trying to make more and more arginine to combat this. And so then we started saying, well, what could be the source of the oxidative burden? And I ended up doing spike protein testing, and his spike proteins were through the roof.
Wow.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of spike proteins. And what's interesting is that this individual had been sick the week before the OCD started. So we did a spike protein detox. We did serrapeptidase, nattokinase, and acetylcysteine, low-dose naltrexone, and some other supportive agents, and the OCD is going away.
Wow, that's amazing. So it goes back to our root cause medicine, right? Let's try to find what triggered something in the first place, if there is a trigger, and then address the trigger and most of the time in our world, if we address the trigger, the symptom that you're dealing with will go away or at least lessen considerably. So it all goes back to that history, that story that the person tells, and being very clear as when is the first time that you experienced this and what was going on in your life at that time.
Yeah. What's the beginning of the beginning? What's the origin story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's crazy, isn't it? We tend to forget, and especially in conventional medicine, there's no time for the story, but that is where all of the nuggets lie for the person to tell you exactly what's going on and why.
And if you're listening to this conversation and you're like, yes, but who can help me with this?
Yes.
And I think that Dr. Deb, you're pointing out one of the opportunities to empower the listener, to empower the person to take control of their own health. Because I remember for me, one of the biggest sources of victory was to reclaim my personal power and my health. I'd been trained, you eat when we tell you to eat. You know, when you're a baby, you eat when they feed you, right? You bathe when we say, you wear these clothes. And we're very largely socialized, like trust your doctor. Your doctor's the authority of your health. And I think that as the information era blossoms and we all have access to so much more knowledge, is to really be accountable to doing the inner work, listening to podcast conversations like this, and find a trusted clinician that you can work through these things with.
Yeah.
And a really good starting point is that your biography becomes your biology. And so write your biography, write your story, write down those moments that changed the way that you saw yourself, others in the world. Write down those moments that were I needed to put on that coat and what this coat looks like and what changed at that time. And then you can bring that information to your doctor, and then hopefully they can partner with you to treat the root cause or find a good naturopath.
I love that. So I have one last question for you. It's the question that everybody gets asked on our episode, and it's the last question. If you were able to change one thing in medicine today, what would that be?
I would want to change so that medicine listens to the laws of nature instead of fighting it.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Nicole, thank you so much for being with us today. How do people find you? Where do they find your book, Panic Proof, or connect with you if they're interested in working with you directly?
You can find Panic Proof, the audiobook, or the paperback anywhere books are sold. And you can find me on all the platforms, Instagram, YouTube, my website at Dr. Nicole Cain, which is CAIN. And I have a free quiz on my website. It's the 9 types of anxiety quiz. So if you're wondering, while there's a lot of information out there, where do I start? Is you could take the quiz for free and it will point you in some directions where you can do some deeper digging.
Thank you for joining me today.
It's been wonderful. Thanks, Dr. Deb.
So thank you for joining me today on Let's Talk Wellness Now. If this episode has resonated with you, share it with someone who could benefit from understanding the root causes of anxiety, panic, and nervous system dysregulation. Remember, wellness isn't just about feeling good. It's about thriving in every area of your life. And if you're ready to explore how root cause and integrative medicine can help you, visit Serenity Healthcare Center as we welcome on our own integrative nurse practitioner who is focusing on psychiatric care as well. And until next time, I'm Dr. Deb, reminding you to take care of your body, mind, and spirit. Be well, and we'll see you on the next episode.